The hum of the engine was the only sound as I turned onto my street, a deep sense of relief washing over me. The work conference had been a success, but after 5 days of sterile hotel rooms and forced small talk, all I wanted was my own bed, my own quiet space. It was a simple, deep-seated ache for home. But as I pulled up to the driveway, something was wrong. A messy pile of black garbage bags sat right by the gate, looking like a monument to someone's forgotten chore. Did they forget trash day again? I thought to myself, a familiar flicker of annoyance rising in me. I got closer, and the annoyance curdled into ice in my stomach. That wasn't just trash. I could see the corner of the faded quilt my grandma had made for me when I was 10. The bright, unmistakable yellow spine of my favorite fantasy novel peeked out from a tear in one of the bags. And there it was, the worn leather strap of the laptop bag I'd saved for 3 months to buy. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't their trash. It was my life, stuffed into plastic and left at the curb like refuse. I looked up at the porch. My mother, Sharon, a woman whose love always seemed to have conditions, stood with her arms crossed, a mask of cold resolve on her face. Flanking her were my younger siblings, Liam and Chloe, her silent, emotionless guards. They just stood there completely still, watching me. Then, her voice sliced through the evening air, flat and devoid of any feeling. "You're 25, you have a good job. It's time for you to leave now." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a verdict. I got out of the car and walked slowly towards the bags, the gravel crunching under my feet. I looked at the pathetic pile of my belongings, then back at their 3 blank faces. A strange thing happened. I didn't feel the urge to scream or beg. Instead, a hollow, ringing calm settled over me, the kind that comes after the worst has already happened. A small, sad smile touched my lips. "Okay," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I turned around, got back in my car without another word, and just drove away. I left them standing there in the silence they had created, their faces finally breaking into shock. They had expected a fight, a scene. I gave them my absence instead. And the worst part, I wasn't even surprised. It was just the loudest echo of a story I had been living my whole life. As I drove away from my life in trash bags, the quiet hum of the car was a strange comfort. It gave me space to think, to finally connect the dots of a picture I had been staring at my whole life without truly seeing. In my family's universe, everyone had a role, a neatly assigned part to play. My brother, Liam, who was 23, was the family's charismatic but reckless golden child. He could crash a car or fail a class, and with a charming smile, all would be forgiven and fixed for him. Then there was my sister, Chloe, 21, who was cast as the delicate one. She was a fragile artist, supposedly too sensitive to handle the harsh realities of a job or a budget, a narrative she leaned into with practiced ease. And then there was me. I wasn't the charming one or the delicate one. I was just the foundation they all stood on. I was the responsible one, the capable one, the one who just handled things. This wasn't a role I auditioned for. It was assigned to me at birth, and the costume was a heavy cloak of other people's expectations. My needs were always secondary, my wants were frivolous, and my savings account was treated less like my future and more like the family's emergency slush fund. The injustice of it was a low, constant hum in the background of my life, a hum that had just become a deafening roar. I remember when I was 19, working 2 jobs to pay my own way through community college. The exhaustion was bone deep, a constant companion as I juggled shifts at a diner with classes and homework. I remember my hands shaking from caffeine as I calculated that I was $500 short for a semester's worth of textbooks. I approached my mother, my voice small, and asked for help. She gave me that familiar, pitying smile and said, "Oh, honey, money is just too tight right now. But you're so good at figuring things out." It was meant to be a compliment, but it felt like a dismissal. So, I figured it out. I ate ramen for a month and picked up extra shifts, my grades slipping slightly from the fatigue. About a month later, I was cleaning out the junk drawer in the kitchen and found it. A credit card receipt. It was for a $3,000 charge, a payment for an all-inclusive spring break trip to Cancun. It was for Liam. As I stood there holding that slip of paper, I didn't just see the cost of a vacation. In my mind, an internal ledger began to run. I saw the textbook I went without, the dentist appointment I postponed, the countless small joys I'd denied myself because money was tight. In that moment, I understood that tight was a word that only ever applied to me. Another memory surfaced, this one sharper, colder. It was 2 years ago, on a rainy November night. My old beat-up car, the one I'd bought myself, sputtered and died on the side of the highway. I was terrified. Cars were speeding past, splashing water onto my windshield, and I was miles from the nearest exit. My first call was to my mom. Her voice was distracted when she answered. I explained the situation, my voice trembling a little. "You'll have to take an Uber," she said, her tone final. "I can't leave the house right now. Chloe is having a really bad day and she needs me." So that's what I did. I paid $150 for an Uber and sat in silence the whole way home, feeling a profound and unshakable loneliness. The next day, I was scrolling through social media, and a new post from Chloe popped up. It was a picture of her and my mom, their faces covered in green mud masks, huge smiles on their faces. They were at a luxury spa. The timestamp on the photo was from the exact time I had been stranded on the highway. Chloe wasn't having a bad day. She was having a spa day. And the family car, I realized, was only for their convenience, not my safety. This was the world created by my mother, Sharon, a woman who fundamentally mistook her son's dependence for love and her daughter's independence for coldness. Her entire parenting philosophy was built on a deeply false narrative that she repeated like a mantra to herself and anyone who would listen. Liam and Chloe needed constant support because they were sensitive. I was denied that same support because I was strong. She would say it with a proud look on her face, as if she were complimenting me. But what I heard was something else entirely. She wasn't celebrating my resilience. She was justifying her neglect. My strength wasn't a gift, it was my punishment. That's what led to the garbage bags. The real betrayal, the act that finally severed the last thread of my compliance, happened a month before my work trip. I was looking for an insurance document in my mom's desk when I found an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a fully executed lease agreement for a luxury downtown apartment. My name was listed as the primary leaseholder, the guarantor. The tenant was Liam. My blood ran cold. He had been rejected for the apartment on his own, so my mother had simply forged my signature, using my good credit history without my permission. When I confronted her, she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. "He deserved a nice place to live," she said, as if that explained everything. "Your credit is so good, what's the big deal?" The big deal, I told her, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt before, was that it was fraud. It was identity theft. That afternoon, I went to the bank, reported the fraud to have the lease nullified, and put a freeze on all my credit. For the first time in my life, I said no. My refusal to be their silent, unwilling guarantor wasn't seen as an act of self-preservation. To them, it was the ultimate act of war. Lying in a cheap motel bed that night, surrounded by my salvaged belongings, I realized they would never see me. So I decided to make them see the truth instead. In the sterile quiet of that cheap motel room, something inside me shifted. The air smelled of bleach and old cigarette smoke, a stark contrast to the storm of emotion that had been raging inside me. But now, the storm was over. The tears were gone, replaced by a strange and unnerving calm. I looked at the few belongings I'd managed to salvage, and I made a decision. I was done seeking their love. I was done trying to be worthy of their respect. My new goal wasn't to win them back. It was to reclaim my life. I would stop being their emotional punching bag and start being their bookkeeper. I sat on the edge of the stiff bed, opened my laptop, and the hunt began. It was a methodical, almost clinical process. I pulled up years of my bank statements, my finger tracing the screen as I highlighted every single rent payment I had made since I was 18. Rent that I now knew was just a slush fund for my siblings' wants. Then I moved to my text messages, scrolling back through years of conversations. There were dozens from Liam. "Hey, can you spot me $200 for concert tickets? I'll pay you back next week." A promise as empty then as it was now. The unpaid debts were a digital monument to his carelessness and my forced generosity. Next came the emails. I searched for my mother's name and found a graveyard of broken promises and financial burdens. "Can you just cover the internet bill this month, honey? Things are tight. The electric is due. Would you be a doll and handle it?" I saw how this month had quietly turned into every month. Those small favors, those little requests, had compounded over the years into a mountain of debt I had shouldered alone. I wasn't just helping out, I was the sole provider for their comfortable lifestyle, and I had the receipts to prove it. This wasn't about revenge, it was about accounting. I opened a new spreadsheet, the white cells looking clean and impartial. I created the columns, each title a small dagger of truth: date, amount, recipient, stated purpose, actual use, unpaid balance. With every line item I entered, the total at the bottom grew. 10,000, 20,000, 30. It was a staggering amount. And as the number climbed, I didn't feel anger. I felt validation. Then, I remembered the most crucial detail. I logged into the utility company accounts for the family home. The electricity, the water, the internet, all of them were in my name, a relic from when I was the only one with good enough credit to get them approved. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. I didn't cancel them. Instead, I calmly scheduled the service disconnection date for all of them. For exactly 6 months from now, I had the proof. I had the plan. All that was left was to choose the right moment to burn their perfect world to the ground. The next 6 months were a blur of healing and hard work. For the first time in my adult life, my time and energy belonged completely to me. I found a small apartment on the other side of town, a cozy little place with a window that got the morning sun. I furnished it with mismatched second-hand items that I chose, that I paid for, that were entirely mine. Each crooked bookshelf and chipped coffee mug felt more like home than the perfectly decorated house I'd left behind. I poured myself into my job, earning a small promotion, and I started rediscovering the person I was when I wasn't playing a role for my family. There were, of course, attempts to breach my new peace. Sporadic, half-hearted texts would come through from my siblings, mostly asking for favors or complaining about some new inconvenience. My mother left a few voicemails, her tone oscillating wildly between saccharine sweetness and passive-aggressive guilt. I listened to none of them. I simply blocked their numbers, one by one, building a digital wall of silence around my new life. The silence was blissful. It was the sound of my own thoughts, my own priorities, my own future finally being allowed to take root without being choked out by their needs. I let them sit with the consequences of their actions. I let the calendar pages turn. Then, right on schedule, the storm hit. It began as a single drop of rain on a quiet Tuesday evening. A text from an unknown number buzzed on my coffee table. It was Chloe. "Why is the Wi-Fi off? I have a project due." I looked at the message, a small, humorless smile on my face. I didn't reply. Minutes later, another buzz. Another unknown number. This one was Liam. "Dude, the power's out. My phone's gonna die." The casual entitlement in his words was so familiar it was almost comforting. I let his message hang in the air, unanswered. Then the floodgates opened. My phone began to vibrate non-stop, a frantic, angry buzzing that seemed to fill my entire apartment. It was a digital siege. Missed calls stacked up, one after another, all from my aunt's number. A torrent of text messages flooded my screen, a frantic cascade of panic and rage from my mother, using my aunt as her mouthpiece. "Where are you? How could you do this to us? You've gone too far. Answer me." 60 messages in under an hour. I watched the notifications pile up with a strange sense of detachment, like a meteorologist watching a hurricane make landfall from the safety of a fortified bunker. I waited. I let their panic crest and then begin to subside. Only when my phone had been silent for a full 10 minutes did I pick it up. My hands were perfectly steady. I didn't call. I simply sent a single message to a group chat with my mom, Liam, and Chloe. My words were simple, factual, and cold. "You told me to leave 6 months ago. I assumed you would have handled your own bills by now. All the utilities were in my name, remember? The name you used for the apartment lease." The response was instantaneous. My mother called back, her voice a hysterical shriek the moment I answered. "You are a cruel, ungrateful child," she screamed, the sound tinny and distorted through the phone's speaker. "After everything we have done for you, this is how you repay us? By leaving us in the dark? What kind of monster are you?" I held the phone away from my ear, letting her tirade wash over me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I waited for her to take a breath. When she finally paused, my reply was quiet and controlled. "Everything you've done for me?" I asked, a genuine curiosity in my voice. "Let me send you the invoice." While she was still sputtering, trying to formulate her next accusation, I texted the group chat a single link. It was a link to a public Google Doc. The title was simple: Professional Financial Ledger, Expenses Paid on Behalf of the Household. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, heavy and ragged. I imagined her clicking the link, her anger turning to confusion, and then to dawning horror. The document wasn't an angry letter, it was an accountant's nightmare. It contained the spreadsheet, meticulously detailed. It had the screenshots of Liam's and Chloe's endless requests for money. It had copies of the highlighted bank statements and the emails where she had begged me to cover bills. It was an itemized list of my financial ruin at their hands, irrefutable and cold. The screaming stopped. All I could hear was a strangled silence. Then, I heard a panicked voice in the background. It was Liam. His voice wasn't charming or confident now, it was thin and terrified. "What is it? What did she send?" he asked. A moment later, I heard him again, his voice cracking with disbelief. "She kept records? She kept all the records?" They couldn't gaslight a spreadsheet. They couldn't guilt-trip a bank statement. The truth, in all its numerical glory, was staring them in the face, and they had absolutely nowhere to hide. And in the ringing silence, I didn't feel anger or victory. I just felt quiet. For the first time, I was the one who got to walk away. After I hung up the phone, the silence in my small apartment was absolute. It was a stark contrast to the storm of voicemails and texts that had preceded it. I blocked my mother's number and then my aunt's, severing the last lines of communication. Of course, the fallout wasn't over, it just changed channels. A few days later, my aunt, a woman who believed family harmony was a fragile vase that must be protected at all costs, even if it meant gluing the broken pieces together with lies, called me from her husband's phone. Her voice was thick with manufactured concern and disappointment. She told me my mother was a mess, that Liam and Chloe were lost without my guidance, and that I had made my point. Now, she urged, it was time to be the bigger person and help them sort things out. It was the same script I'd heard my entire life. Be the bigger person. Be the strong one. Absorb the damage and keep the peace. I listened patiently until she was finished, and then I gave an answer I had been rehearsing for a decade. "I was the bigger person for 10 years, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice calm and even. "My retirement from that role is effective immediately. They are adults. It's time they learn to sort things out for themselves." I didn't wait for a reply. I simply said goodbye and ended the call. That was the last guilt trip I ever accepted a ticket for. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full of potential. It was the fertile ground where I would finally plant a life of my own. A year later, the person who woke up on that cool Monday morning was almost unrecognizable from the girl who had driven away from her life in garbage bags. I now lived in a world of my own quiet routines. I made coffee in my own kitchen, the rich smell filling the air as I looked out the window of my small but sunny apartment. The only sound was the gentle hum of the city and a playlist of music that Annie and Chouten had chosen, music that calmed my soul instead of grating on my nerves. The walls weren't bare, they were decorated with prints and art that I loved, pieces I had found at local markets that spoke to me. There were plants in the window thriving in the sunlight, a small green testament to my ability to nurture something and watch it grow. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. At work, my focus and newfound creative energy had earned me a promotion to a project lead. For the first time, I felt seen and appreciated for my capabilities, not just used for them. My contributions were met with praise and respect, not with the expectation that I would simply handle everything because that was my job. The extra income wasn't for bailing anyone else out. It was for building my own savings, for planning my own future, for taking a pottery class on weekends simply because it brought me joy. I even started dating someone. His name is Ben, and the most remarkable thing about him is not his charm or his humor, but his respect for the word no. He is someone who listens, who sees my boundaries not as a challenge to be overcome, but as an essential part of who I am. To be with someone who didn't need me to be their support system, but simply wanted me to be their partner. It was a revelation. The peace I felt was palpable. It was in the easy way I breathed, the unclenched set of my jaw, the absence of that constant low-grade anxiety that had been my lifelong companion. I had stopped living in a state of crisis management and had simply started living. About a month ago, I got a call from my cousin Maya, a kind soul who had always managed to stay out of the direct family drama. She was calling just to catch up, but eventually, she gave me the final update I didn't know I needed. My mom had been forced to sell the house. Without my steady contributions, she couldn't afford the mortgage and the bills on her own. She was now living in the spare bedroom at my Aunt Carol's house. Liam and Chloe had been forced to get their own place, a cramped, run-down apartment on the bad side of town. They were both working minimum-wage jobs for the first time in their lives and, according to Maya, complained constantly about how unfair and hard everything was. Hearing it, I didn't feel a surge of victory or triumph. There was no "I told you so" moment. There was just a quiet, profound sadness. A sadness for the people they could have been if they hadn't been enabled for so long, and a quiet gratitude for the person I was becoming now that I was free. Their inability to change, their immediate pivot to blaming the world for the consequences of their own choices, was the final confirmation that I had done the right thing. They hadn't changed at all, but their power source was gone. Last night, I had some friends over for dinner. As I was cleaning up, I looked at a picture on my mantelpiece. It's not a formal family portrait. It's a candid shot from a hiking trip a few months ago. A picture of me and Ben and 2 other friends, all of us laughing, our faces flushed from the sun and the climb. I'm standing in the middle, and I'm smiling. It's not the tight, polite smile I used to perform at family gatherings. It's a real smile, wide and genuine and completely unforced. And in that moment, I realized I was finally home. I learned that sometimes the only way to find your place in the world is to leave the one you were assigned. If you've ever had to become your own hero, leave a comment below. I see you.